The alien city of Valora Prime burned beneath the twin suns, plasma fire streaking across the skyline like falling stars. Ethan Cole, a human engineer stationed far from home, ducked behind a half-collapsed wall as another explosion thundered through the air. His hands shook, dust and blood coating his palms, but his mind remained sharp, searching for any working defense drone he could patch together. He had not come here to fight, only to help rebuild. Yet now the entire district had become a war zone. Through the smoke he saw civilians running, tall, silver-skinned aliens clutching their children, their faces full of fear. Screams echoed as buildings cracked and fell, sending shards of glass like rain. Ethan could barely breathe, the air thick with burning ozone, but then a sound cut through everything. The high, terrified cry of a child. He turned and saw her, small, maybe 5 years old in human terms, an alien child with luminous blue eyes. Standing frozen amid the wreckage, a blast cannon fired somewhere above, and Ethan saw the plasma bolt heading straight for her. Without thinking, he ran. He leapt over broken metal, lungs burning, his body moving faster than his fear. He reached her just in time, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her down as the bolt struck the ground behind them. The shockwave lifted them both, tossing them into the side of a ruined vehicle. Ethan groaned, pain flashing through his ribs, but the child whimpered softly, alive and shaking. He opened his eyes to find her staring at him, terrified yet trusting, her tiny hands gripping his uniform. Hey, you're okay," he whispered, his voice trembling but gentle. The alien soldiers nearby paused, weapons aimed at him, confusion flickering in their eyes. To them, humans were outsiders, useful workers but never part of their noble circles. Yet here was a human who had thrown himself between death and the heir of their royal bloodline. None of them moved, not even when the dust began to settle and the echo of battle faded. Ethan lifted the child carefully, shielding her with his body as stray sparks lit the ground. He looked around for any safe path, and there was none. Only ruin. A soldier shouted something in their language, and within seconds a group surrounded him, rifles raised. Ethan didn't fight, he just kept the child close, whispering, "It's all right." "I've got you," the alien commander barked an order, and the soldiers lowered their guns slightly unsure. Moments later, a floating drone arrived, projecting a holographic seal that shimmered gold and blue. Every soldier dropped to one knee. Ethan blinked as a voice echoed from the drone, calm, regal and cold. "This is Queen Sarathis," the voice said. "Bring the human who saved my son unharmed." The soldiers looked stunned, and so did Ethan. He glanced down at the little girl, or rather, little prince, and who clung tighter to his neck. Her small crest markings glowed faintly, symbols of royal lineage. He had just saved the heir to an empire without even knowing it. As the soldiers escorted them through the burning streets, alien citizens watched in silence. Whispers followed him. A human protected the royal child. No one has ever done that. Some bowed as they passed. Others stared with suspicion. Ethan ignored it all, focusing only on the child's trembling breath against his chest. When they finally reached the evacuation shuttle, the Queen's emblem gleamed above the hatch like a star. Guards took the child gently from his arms, though she refused to let go, her hands clutching his sleeve. Ethan smiled softly, brushing her hair aside. "You're safe now," he murmured. But the Queen's soldiers didn't look at him as a hero. They looked at him like a mystery. The shuttle lifted off, and Ethan was forced to his seat, his body aching. He stared out the window as Valora Prime shrank below, a city scarred but still alive. He didn't know what awaited him at the palace, only that the Queen herself had seen what he'd done. He had acted on instinct, not politics, not strategy, just humanity. And somehow that single moment had changed everything. Up above in the Royal Command Tower, Queen Sarathis watched the recording replay again and again. The image of a human shielding her son burned in her mind like fire. Around her, the council whispered of manipulation, propaganda, and human audacity. But the Queen said nothing, her golden eyes fixed on the screen. Finally, she rose from her throne and spoke in a voice that silenced all debate. "Bring the human to me," she ordered, her tone unyielding. Alive, down below, the shuttle carried Ethan toward an empire that did not trust him. An empire that would soon learn what a single human's courage could mean. The stars outside shimmered cold and bright as the engines roared. Ethan closed his eyes, unaware that his simple act of protection would ignite a bond strong enough to shake galaxies. Ethan woke to the soft hum of alien machines and the scent of strange flowers drifting through the air. When he opened his eyes, he wasn't in the battlefield anymore, but inside a vast golden chamber carved with glowing runes. A faint light shimmered across the walls. Shifting like liquid metal, he tried to sit up, but pain spread through his side, his ribs still bruised from the explosion. Alien healers surrounded him, tall and graceful, their hands moving above his body as streams of blue energy healed his wounds. "You are safe," one said softly. Her voice calm yet distant. Ethan blinked, his mind catching up. Where am I?" "In the royal citadel of Valora," she replied. "You saved the heir, and the queen commands your presence." Her words struck him like thunder. The heir, he thought, realizing that the little child he saved wasn't just anyone. He had protected the only son of Queen Sarathis, ruler of the most powerful empire in this sector. He looked down at his clothes, now replaced with a clean black uniform marked by a golden crest. 2 guards entered, both armored in crystal plating, their faces expressionless. "Human, the queen summons you," one announced. Ethan's throat went dry, but he nodded, standing carefully. The palace corridors were vast and filled with silent watchers, nobles, advisors, guards, and all staring at him with disbelief. Whispers followed as he passed. "That's the human. Why did he risk himself? What does the queen see in him?" They led him to the throne chamber, its ceiling high enough to hold a starship. At the far end, seated upon a dais of shining obsidian, was Queen Sarathis. She was taller than any human, her silver skin glowing faintly beneath her ceremonial crown. Her eyes, golden and piercing, carried both power and sorrow. Ethan stopped at the foot of the steps, unsure how to bow in an alien court. But before he could speak, the small prince ran forward, laughing, and hugged his leg. The room gasped. Dozens of nobles rising in shock. The queen raised one elegant hand. Silencing them all, her voice flowed like music, soft yet filled with command. "You saved my son," she said. Each word heavy with meaning. Ethan looked up, nervous. I just did what anyone would have done." A ripple of whispers filled the chamber. Anyone? No human would have dared. The queen stepped closer, her presence both regal and kind. "Yet no one did, only you," she said. And for a moment her expression softened. She turned to her council. "By royal decree, this human shall remain under my protection." The nobles erupted, some shouting protests, others demanding tradition be followed. A tall general stepped forward, his voice cold. "Your Majesty, this human may have acted by chance. We cannot trust his kind." Ethan clenched his fists but said nothing. The queen's eyes flashed with quiet fury. "General Veros, the man you accuse carried my son through fire," she said, her tone icy. "Would you have done the same?" The general bowed his head, silent, and the room fell quiet again. Ethan could feel every stare in the hall pressing against him. He didn't want power, titles, or rewards, only to go home. But before he could speak, the queen's words struck again like lightning. "From this day forth," she declared, "you belong to me." The chamber froze. No one dared to breathe. Ethan's heart skipped. Unsure what she meant, her voice softened. But her gaze never wavered. "Until I decide otherwise, you will stay by my side as guardian of my heir." The prince smiled brightly and tugged Ethan's hand. Ethan looked down at him, realizing there was no refusal. Outside the throne room, 2 attendants approached, guiding him toward royal quarters. As the doors closed behind him, he felt the weight of countless eyes still watching. Inside his new chamber, he sat by the window, seeing the alien skyline stretch endlessly. He whispered to himself, "I didn't save him for reward, so why does this feel like a cage?" Meanwhile, in the shadows of the great hall, General Veros spoke to another noble. "He's dangerous," Veros hissed. "If the queen trusts a human over her own people, our empire will fall." The noble nodded, a cruel smile on his face. "Then we'll make sure the queen sees him as a threat." Their voices faded into the corridors, but destiny had already shifted. The act of saving a child had bound Ethan to a throne of stars, and in the queen's private chamber she replayed the battle footage again, her golden eyes softening each time she saw him leap through fire. Her whisper barely reached the air. Why would a human risk his life for someone not his own? Outside, the night over Valora Prime shimmered, and beneath the alien moons the bond between a queen, her heir, and one stubborn human had only just begun. The first light of Valora Prime's twin suns painted the palace in hues of violet and gold. Ethan stood on a high balcony, watching the alien city slowly come alive again after the chaos of war. The air smelled of metal and ozone, the faint hum of energy shields echoing through the distance. He should have felt at peace. Yet every breath reminded him that he was still a stranger here, a guest in chains of honor. He glanced at his reflection in the glass wall, a human wrapped in foreign silk robes. With a golden crest pinned to his chest, that crest marked him as guardian of the air, a title given only to those the Queen trusted completely. But Ethan knew trust in the royal court was as thin as a blade's edge. Every noble he passed bowed with polished courtesy, but behind every bow hid curiosity, envy, and hate. The Queen had granted him freedom inside the palace, but the guards never stopped watching. Even the corridors whispered with voices that carried secrets. He could feel it. Something wasn't right. The same people who smiled during the day were plotting in the shadows by night, and at the center of it all stood General Varos, the man whose pride had cracked the moment the Queen had defended a human. Ethan spent his days near the young Prince Kale, who clung to him like a shadow. They played in the gardens, explored the archives, and once even snuck into the hangar to see the royal ships. Ethan taught him small things: how to fix broken circuits, how to read human numbers, how to think before reacting. In return, Kale taught Ethan the alien language, their customs, and their way of seeing energy as a living force bit by bit. The cold walls of the palace began to feel less like a prison and more like a strange kind of home. One afternoon, Ethan was repairing a damaged defense drone in the courtyard. Several alien officers watched, whispering among themselves. When sparks flew and the machine whirred back to life, their whispers stopped, replaced by shock. Human technology is crude, one sneered. Yet he repairs our royal systems with his bare hands. Ethan smiled faintly, wiping the sweat from his brow. Crude maybe, he said, but sometimes simple things survive longer than perfect ones. The Queen happened to be passing then, hearing the words, and a rare smile curved her lips. But not everyone was pleased that night. General Varos gathered 3 assassins in a dark hall lit by crimson glass. The Queen protects him now, one assassin hissed. He is untouchable. Varos leaned forward, his eyes cold. No one is untouchable when the lights go out. He handed them a small device. An energy pulse generator. Silent but deadly. Make it look like a human accident, he ordered. Let the Queen see the danger of trusting an outsider. Hours later, while Ethan slept, the lights in his chamber flickered. He woke to a soft hiss, metal against air. A shadow moving near the door, he rolled silently off the bed, grabbing a small tool from his desk. The figure lunged and Ethan ducked, striking the attacker's hand and knocking the weapon aside. The room erupted in flashes of light as another assassin fired. Ethan dove behind a table, his heart racing, his mind sharp. He slammed the tool into a wall port, sending a surge of electricity through the chamber. The lights exploded, the assassin screamed, and then everything went dark. Moments later, the door burst open, and royal guards flooded in. They froze at the sight. 2 assassins unconscious, one pinned by debris, and Ethan standing there breathing hard. By the stars, one guard muttered. He fought them off alone. The Queen arrived minutes later, her presence filling the room like a storm. She stared at the wreckage, then at Ethan, her voice trembling with fury. Who did this? She demanded. Ethan shook his head. They wore no insignia, but they moved like soldiers. The Queen turned to her captain, her tone sharp as lightning. Search every rank, every chamber, every shadow. Find who dares defy me. Then her gaze softened as she looked back at Ethan. Did they harm you? She asked quietly. Ethan blinked in surprise, her voice suddenly almost human. I'm fine, he said. I've seen worse on Earth. That strange word, Earth, lingered in her mind, like a forgotten melody from another life. Later, alone in her private chamber, the Queen replayed the attack footage. The image of Ethan shielding her son flashed beside the image of him fighting trained killers barehanded. She whispered to herself. Humans, fragile yet unyielding, but outside. General Varos watched her from the shadows, anger burning like acid in his veins. He turned and muttered to his conspirators. If she will not see reason, then we will show her what humans truly bring, chaos. And so, the storm around Ethan began to rise again. He had survived one war only to step into another. A war of pride, loyalty and power, and somewhere deep within the palace, a secret was about to surface. one that would prove the attack on the prince was no accident at all. The palace of Valora Prime glittered under the starlit sky, but beneath its brilliance, shadows moved with quiet intent. Ethan could feel it. The air had changed, heavy with suspicion and fear. Since the night of the assassination attempt, whispers followed him wherever he went. Servants bowed too quickly, guards watched too closely, and nobles spoke in half-sentences that stopped when he entered the room. He had become both a symbol of courage and a threat to tradition. The queen, however, seemed different. Her once distant tone had softened, and she now invited Ethan to council meetings. He stood beside her as generals reported on the rebuilding of the city and the search for traitors. Every eye in the chamber burned with silent judgment. When he spoke, offering tactical insights or engineering suggestions, most ignored him. But the queen listened always. Her trust in him grew, and so did the hatred of those who envied it. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the palace gardens, Ethan sat by a fountain adjusting a small wrist device. It was something he had built using scraps, a scanner tuned to energy signatures. Ever since the attack, he had noticed strange power fluctuations in the royal wing. They came and went at odd hours like hidden transmissions. He activated the device again, and faint lines of blue light appeared in the air. Encrypted signals, moving through the palace walls. "Someone's sending messages," he muttered. "And not to the queen." Before he could trace the source, a voice interrupted him. "Still fixing things you don't understand, human." It was General Varos stepping from the shadows with a smirk. Ethan straightened slowly, calm but alert. "Understanding's how I've survived this long," he replied evenly. Varos chuckled. "You think saving a child gives you power here? You're a tool." "Nothing more." Ethan met his gaze. "Maybe, but even tools can rebuild or destroy." Varos's smile faded, his eyes narrowing like a predator's. "Careful, human," he said, turning away. "The queen's favor is a dangerous shield, and it doesn't last forever." That night, Ethan followed the signal through the corridors. The palace was quiet, guards stationed like statues along the walls. He moved silently, guided by the faint pulsing glow of his scanner. The trail led him to a restricted archive chamber, the Hall of Records. Inside, golden cylinders floated above pedestals, each holding fragments of royal communication. Ethan's device beeped faster, pointing toward one in the corner, locked and sealed with high-level access. He frowned, kneeling to override the barrier using his portable circuit key. The seal broke with a soft hum and a projection flared to life. Lines of alien script scrolled across the air, translating automatically into human language. His eyes widened. It wasn't a message from rebels outside. It was an order from inside the palace sent days before the first attack. The message read, "Ensure the child is in the west courtyard during the test strike. No survivors." Ethan's pulse quickened. Someone inside had arranged the attack on the queen's son. Before he could copy the data, the lights dimmed. A cold metallic voice filled the chamber. Unauthorized access detected. He spun around. Guards were already approaching, their armor reflecting the golden glow. They surrounded him instantly, weapons drawn. "By order of General Varos, you are under arrest for espionage," one said. Ethan raised his hands. "You don't understand. I found proof someone inside." But they didn't listen. Grabbing him roughly and dragging him toward the detention wing, the queen was informed within minutes. Her expression darkened as she entered the chamber where Ethan was held. He stood behind an energy barrier, tired and bruised but defiant. "Your Majesty," he said, "they're hiding the truth from you. Someone in your own court tried to kill your son." The council members standing behind her murmured in disbelief. Varos stepped forward, pretending outrage. "Lies!" He broke into restricted archives and tampered with royal files. Ethan glared at him. "You'd know, wouldn't you?" Since it was your authorization code that opened the lock, the room froze. The queen's eyes narrowed, her golden pupils flaring with light. "Enough," she said quietly, her voice like thunder wrapped in silk. "Show me the data." Ethan handed over the small drive he'd hidden inside his sleeve. She scanned it quickly as sun and silence filled the room. When she finally spoke, her tone was sharp and cold. "Guards, seize General Varos." The chamber erupted. Varos tried to resist, shouting, "You're betraying your people for a human." The queen's gaze cut him down. "No, I'm protecting my son from a traitor." As the guards dragged the furious general away, Ethan exhaled slowly. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Varos wasn't the true mastermind. He was just another pawn in a larger game. The messages hinted at something far greater. Someone pulling strings from beyond the palace walls. Later that night, the queen visited Ethan's cell again. Her expression was unreadable, caught between gratitude and guilt. "You risked your life once for my child," she said softly. "And again for the truth." Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess I'm just not good at watching people get hurt." The queen's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer. Then she turned to the guards. "Release him. From now on, he answers only to me." As Ethan stepped into the moonlight once more, the palace seemed different, no longer a place of wonder, but a battlefield dressed in gold. The real war was only beginning, hidden in the silence of the stars. The dawn broke cold and colorless over Valora Prime, casting the palace in shades of steel and frost. Ethan stood before the Grand Council chamber, flanked by guards in silver armor, his wrists bound by energy cuffs that hummed softly. He had faced plasma storms, assassins, and alien warriors, but never a courtroom filled with nobles who looked at him like a contagion. The chamber doors opened with a low hiss, and 1,000 eyes turned toward the human who had defied their ancient order. At the center of the room sat the circular council dais. Layered in gold and obsidian, Queen Serathis presided above them all, calm but unreadable, her golden gaze fixed on Ethan. To her right sat the High Chancellor, an old alien whose voice had judged wars and ended dynasties. He raised a long hand signaling silence. "Ethan Cole," he began, "you stand accused of violating royal security, of espionage, and of influencing the Queen's will through deceit." Ethan's jaw tightened, his voice steady despite the weight of their stares. "I didn't violate anything. I found proof that one of your own generals planned the attack on your prince." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "And yet you broke into sacred archives, a crime punishable by death." Before Ethan could respond, the Queen raised her hand and silence fell like a storm. "Enough," she said softly. "We are not here to debate fear. We are here to uncover truth." General Varos was brought forward in chains, his once proud face pale and defiant. His voice cracked as he shouted, "This is a mockery. That human twisted evidence. He seeks to destroy our unity." Ethan turned to the council, holding up the small device that contained the decrypted message. "If I wanted to destroy your unity," he said calmly, "I would have stayed silent. Because the real enemy depends on that silence." The chamber erupted again. Nobles arguing, advisors whispering. The Queen stood, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Show them," she commanded. Ethan stepped to the projection dais, activating the data. Holograms flickered to life. Messages from Varos's personal code. Instructions to move the child during the test strike. Gasps filled the air, and the Chancellor's composure cracked. "Varos," he hissed. "You conspired against the royal bloodline?" Varos laughed bitterly. "You're fools. You think the Queen's obsession with this human won't doom us all? She's already breaking tradition for him." Guards struck him to silence, but the damage was done. Whispers began again, this time laced with something darker. Doubt. Ethan looked at the Queen, and for the first time she looked unsure. Her people questioned her loyalty to her own kind. She stood tall, but her voice carried the faint tremor of emotion. "Council," she said, "this man saved my son, exposed a traitor, and asked for nothing in return. If his loyalty is treason, then I welcome treason." The hall erupted in uproar, half the nobles shouting her name, half shouting for her removal. The Chancellor turned to Ethan. "Tell us, human, why? Why risk your life for a child not your own?" Ethan's voice was quiet, but every word carried through the hall. "Because where I come from, we don't measure worth by blood or crown," he said. "We measure it by choice." That child was scared, and then I made a choice. The silence that followed felt alive. For a moment, even the Queen's guards seemed moved. The Queen stepped down from her throne, walking slowly toward him. When she reached him, she spoke softly. "And if I told you that choice has changed our fate?" Before Ethan could answer, the chamber doors burst open. A guard stumbled in, his armor scorched. "Your Majesty! Enemy fleets, they've returned!" The hall erupted again, panic, confusion. Orders shouted across the floor. Ethan felt his heart race, the memories of burning cities flashing in his mind. The Queen's expression hardened, all emotion replaced by steel. "Seal the council," she ordered. "Prepare all fleets for defense." Then she turned to Ethan, the faintest hint of trust in her eyes. "You wanted a chance to prove your loyalty, now you have it." Guards rushed to escort the Queen out, but she paused at the threshold and looked back. Her golden eyes met his one last time. "Do not fail me again, human," she said. Though her tone carried more faith than warning, Ethan watched her leave, the echoes of her steps mixing with the alarms rising through the palace. He looked at the stars burning beyond the chamber's glass ceiling, realizing that once again, he was about to risk his life for a world not his own. And somewhere deep inside the royal citadel, as warships began to launch, a voice whispered from the shadows, unseen and patient. The Queen's trust in that human will be her undoing. A new hand moved the pieces of a larger game, one that neither Ethan nor the Queen yet understood. The storm was coming, and this time the galaxy itself would be caught in its path. The skies above Valora Prime darkened like ink spilling across glass. Every sensor, every beacon in orbit screamed the same warning. The enemy had returned, and this time they weren't hiding. Ethan stood on the command deck of the palace citadel, surrounded by alien officers shouting coordinates and orders. Dozens of massive enemy warships were descending from hyperspace, their hulls black as void, their weapons already glowing red. It wasn't a raid this time, it was an extermination. Queen Sarathis stood at the center of the bridge, her silver armor gleaming under the crimson alarms. Her voice carried across the chaos like thunder. "Activate planetary shields. Launch all fighter wings." The entire chamber moved as one, except for Ethan, who stared at the tactical hologram with a sinking feeling. The formation, the pattern, the timing, and it was too precise, too clean. "They're not attacking the palace," he muttered under his breath. "They're hurting us," the Queen turned sharply. "What did you say?" Ethan pointed to the display, his voice steady. "They're forcing your fleets inward, driving you into the atmosphere where your shield grid is weakest." A nearby commander sneered. "And what would a human know about our systems?" Ethan shot back. "Enough to see when someone's trying to trap you." The Queen raised a hand, silencing the room, her gaze fixed on him. "Then tell me, human," she said. "How do we stop them?" Ethan inhaled slowly, staring at the planet's defense map. "Your outer fleets are useless against that firepower," he said. "But your cities sit on top of gravity wells. If we overload them, the enemy will lose flight stability near the surface." The officers gasped. "Overloading gravity wells could destabilize half the capital. It'll destroy your lower shields," one argued. "And maybe half of Valora itself." Ethan met the Queen's gaze, his voice low but firm. "If you don't, there'll be nothing left to protect." For a long moment, the Queen said nothing, then slowly she nodded. "Do it!" Her command shook the room, but none dared disobey. Ethan was granted full engineering access and rushed to the planetary control spire. The chamber was massive, an ocean of glowing conduits, energy lines pulsing like veins of light. He worked quickly, fingers flying across alien panels, recalibrating gravity emitters to reverse polarity. Kale, the young prince, stood near the doorway under guard, his small voice trembling. "Ethan, will we be safe?" Ethan looked up briefly, forcing a smile. "We'll be fine, kid. I just need to bend a few rules of physics," the boy nodded, though fear glimmered in his eyes outside. Explosions flashed through the clouds as alien cruisers collided with atmospheric storms. The sound was deafening, like gods tearing the sky apart. Suddenly, a transmission broke through the noise. It was the enemy commander, his voice mechanical and cruel. "Queen Sarathis, surrender the human or watch your world burn." Ethan froze, realizing they weren't here for Valora. They were here for him. The Queen's reply came cold and sharp. "You will not touch him. Then you will die with him." The voice hissed and the transmission cut out. Ethan's hands moved faster, rerouting the final surge. The consoles sparked, alarms blared, the chamber trembled. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the planet's core. The gravity wells roared to life. In orbit, enemy ships buckled under the sudden distortion, pulled off course and slamming into one another. Fire rained from the heavens as wreckage burned through the atmosphere. Ethan stumbled back, gasping for breath, his skin scorched by the energy surge. The Queen's voice came through the intercom, urgent. "Ethan!" "Report." He laughed weakly. "Still here. But I think I just gave your planet a new orbit. The command deck erupted in cheers as readings confirmed the enemy fleet retreating. But the joy didn't last. One last warship broke through the burning sky. A dreadnought 5 times the size of the palace. It began descending fast, its engines screaming. A direct collision course. The Queen looked to Ethan, her voice breaking for the first time. If that ship hits, the capital will vanish. Ethan stared at the gravity controls, his mind racing. There's one more option, he said, but it's manual. He didn't wait for her to respond. He ran. The Queen shouted after him, but he was already gone. Sprinting through smoke-filled corridors toward the reactor core, every step felt heavier, the ground quaking beneath him. He reached the final chamber, overloaded the reactor conduits, and forced the energy loop open with his bare hands. Come on, just one more surge, he whispered. The lights flared, and the dreadnought above them was suddenly caught in a gravitational vortex. It twisted, groaned, and exploded into a burning halo above the city. The blast wave shattered windows across the capital. When the light finally faded, Valora Prime still stood. But inside the control chamber, Ethan collapsed to his knees, smoke curling around him. His voice was faint but steady. Told you, I'd fix it. Moments later, the Queen herself rushed into the room, her armor scorched, her crown gone. She knelt beside him, her eyes wide with fear. Stay with me, Ethan, she whispered. Please. But his eyes fluttered, his words fading into the hum of the still glowing reactors. Guess humans really are stubborn. The Queen lifted his head gently, her tears falling like liquid gold. Outside, the people of Valora knelt, looking to the sky their savior had just defended. And though the war was over, the story of one human's courage had only just begun. The fires over Valora Prime had finally dimmed, leaving trails of smoke that curled into the heavens like mourning veils. The once proud capital was broken but not destroyed, its people standing amidst the wreckage, alive because one human had refused to surrender. The great halls of the royal citadel were silent, the air thick with the scent of metal and ash. Inside the med bay, the hum of alien healers filled the chamber as they worked around the clock. On a crystalline bed lay Ethan Cole, pale, motionless, his breathing shallow. Queen Sarathis stood beside him, stripped of her crown and armor, her silver hair falling loose. Her eyes, once sharp as blades, now carried the weight of grief and something deeper, something human. The healer spoke in hushed tones. His body was not made for such energy surges. He may never wake. The Queen's hands trembled slightly as she brushed a burnt strand of hair from Ethan's forehead. He gave everything to protect what wasn't even his world, she whispered. How do I repay a debt like that? Behind her, the doors slid open and the young Prince Kale ran in, his small feet echoing on the floor. He climbed onto the bed and took Ethan's hand, tears glimmering in his bright blue eyes. Please wake up, he whispered. You promised you'd teach me to fly ships when the stars came back. The Queen turned away, her heart breaking at the sight. For all her power, she could not command life, not this time. Days passed, the Empire rebuilding slowly, but without Ethan's presence, the palace felt hollow, too quiet, too careful. Nobles whispered that the Queen had changed, that her decisions had grown unpredictable, compassionate even. Human. They didn't understand that compassion was now her strength, not her weakness. And then one night, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, the monitors by Ethan's bed flickered. His eyes opened, faint but alive. The first thing he saw was the shimmering ceiling and the Queen's silhouette beside him. Guess I'm still here, he murmured weakly, a small smile tugging at his lips. The Queen froze, then let out a shaky breath that sounded almost like a laugh. You impossible creature, she whispered. You should have died 100 times by now. Ethan smirked softly. I've been told that before, when he was strong enough to stand. The Queen summoned the council again, this time not to accuse but to honor. The great hall filled with soldiers, nobles, and citizens, and all waiting for the Queen's decree. Ethan stood beside her, still bandaged, his uniform torn but his gaze steady. The Queen stepped forward, her voice echoing through the chamber. Before us stands a being from another world, a human who gave his strength, his mind and his life to defend ours. Murmurs spread, but no one interrupted. She continued, he saved my son, he saved my throne, and he reminded us what courage truly means. She turned to him, her golden eyes warm. Ethan Cole, I offer you a place among us, not as a subject, But as the guardian of the Empire, gasps filled the hall. No alien, not even a noble-born warrior, had ever been granted such a title. Ethan hesitated, his voice quiet. Your Majesty, I'm just an engineer, not a legend. The Queen smiled faintly. Then perhaps legends are built by those who never sought them. The hall erupted in applause, alien and human alike, their cheers echoing like thunder. Kale ran up to him and hugged his leg. Laughing through his tears, the Queen watched them both, pride and peace softening her features. For the first time in her reign, she felt the Empire's unity born not from fear but from hope. As the ceremony ended, Ethan walked to the balcony overlooking the city. The stars stretched endlessly across the black sky. Sharp, beautiful and free, the Queen joined him, her voice quiet but sure. The galaxy will remember your name, she said. He smiled, looking at her. Then I hope it remembers what we fought for. She tilted her head slightly, curious, and what was that, human? Ethan gazed out at the rebuilt world below. For the chance to prove that no species, no heart, is beyond empathy. The Queen's lips curved into a faint smile, her gaze softening as she whispered, then perhaps humanity's greatest weapon is kindness. The two stood in silence, watching the first sunrise since the war. Light washed over the palace, golden and alive, below them. The people of Valora Prime cheered, chanting a name they had once feared, a name that now meant unity between stars. Ethan Cole, the human protector, and as the twin suns rose higher, a quiet peace settled across the Empire, a fragile, beautiful promise when that maybe, just maybe, one act of courage could change the course of galaxies forever.